This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Mattio Communications.
Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Let's talk for a moment about brand awareness in the cannabis space. The industry is obviously becoming more crowded as it matures. So how do you effectively break through the noise? We all know cannabis marketing has restrictions that make our jobs more difficult. But fortunately, the kick-ass PR and marketing professionals at Mattio Communications know how to elevate your narrative while staying compliant. Their New York and LA-based teams have the connections and powerful storytelling abilities you need to propel your brand onto the national stage. Mattio refuses to let your bold innovations and ambitious breakthroughs fall through the cracks. They'll get your company in front of your most prized audiences via their specialties, which include PR, social media, investor relations, SEO, and more. Mattio shares your vision of normalizing cannabis for the greater good of society. They proudly partner with businesses across the industry, from investors and ancillary companies to large MSOs and local brands. No matter your business goals, Mattio is here to help. Email them today at info@mattio.com. That's INFO @MATTIO.com, or visit their website at mattio.com to get your company the recognition it deserves.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
If you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, then you need to know about Regrow. Regrow is the first of its kind software that leverages components of leading ERP and supply chain systems with the necessary compliance of the cannabis industry. That's right, you'll get all aspects of regulatory compliance built in, with the added value of workforce management, inventory, SOP management, and reporting and metrics that allow for companies to scale successfully. So stop using the whiteboards, spreadsheets, and email to manage your cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing processes, and instead incorporate Regrow. Visit their website at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Brady Cobb. He's the founder and former CEO of Bluma Wellness and One Plant Florida. Mr. Brady Cobb, how are you, sir?
Good, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for making time. Before we started recording, I saw the tweet that you put out, and you said you had an amazing hike with your kids up in the Ute Trail in Aspen, Colorado. So those were some beautiful views that you saw there.
Yeah, the Ute Trail is it's a killer trail. It's not long, but you pick up a lot of elevation, like close to 1,500 feet of elevation. So telling my kids they could do it, and they crushed it, man. I was really proud of them. You don't see a lot of kids on that trail. It's pretty vertical and somewhat technical. So it was really fun. I'm super proud of them.
Absolutely, man. Nothing like being proud of your kids and spending that good quality family time. So I'm happy you're able to do it. And again, thank you for coming on today. You are a special guest. You've been in the industry for a long time now, and kind of seen it from different purviews, which is going to make for an interesting discussion today. So, Brady, before we kick things off, let's first talk about your unique background and the family legacy that you have within both the illicit cannabis space and the legal cannabis space. Obviously, you on the legal side, but your father, Bill Cobb, just to kind of set the stage, from what I've read, orchestrated what is still considered the largest cannabis smuggling operation in U.S. history, according to the Department of Justice, moving over 1.5 million pounds from Colombia to the Florida Panhandle during 1977 through 1983. So, Brady, I've set the stage. Why don't you tell us, man, what was it like growing up with your father, and kind of did the initial spark in the industry happen then? Did it come later? Like, what was your overall perspective back then?
Yeah, so it was, it's in my blood. It's something that, you don't experience something like that as a child and not have it leave a mark.
Right.
And for me, leave some drive. So my dad was, his nickname was Dollar Bill. The guy was a straight hustler. He born North Florida. That's why he ended up moving it through North Florida, because he knew all those. You get up to Northwest Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, it's all creeks and rivers, very unpopulated. You kind of got to know what you're doing. So they saw that as blue sky because there was really no law enforcement up there. Most of the drug enforcement agency law enforcement was focused kind of Fort Lauderdale south all the way down to the Keys.
Right.
So, he did what he did. He was a son of a poor cotton sharecropper. I mean, they had nothing growing up, and he joined the Air Force at 18 to get away from, that poverty. Went down to Central Florida, ended up hooking up and getting the Hawaiian Tropic distributorship for the Florida Keys. And how he got into the business is we lived on 3 acres in the Keys. You leave it to the North Florida redneck to buy 3 acres in the Keys and to have horses on there. We had horses on the property, stables and everything down in the Keys. And he had a barn, and Colombians were moving a big load down our street in 1977, and the truck broke down. And they offered him $100,000 to put the trailer in his barn. He said no problem. Back then, $100,000 in 1977 dollars. Yeah,
absolutely. Living. Yeah, $100,000 now, even, right?
Yeah, $100,000 now. Yeah, $100,000 back then. He's like, hell yeah! And they showed back up the next day, picked it up, and paid him. And he's like, okay, how do we do this again? And flash forward, he became their primary point of distribution into the U.S. And he did everything at a crazy level. I mean, he went and contracted with a French skincare company called Sun Systems, really big company in France. That was his front company, but it was a real business. It's still a very good skincare line over in France. Ran cars at Indy, ran cars and won Le Mans with the Whittingtons driving. Ran Road Atlanta, ran Daytona 500. Got indicted. He had Johnny Cochran, Alan Dershowitz, F. Lee Bailey. He put together the OJ team before OJ did. I still have all their signed cards they sent. Congratulations on the birth of your son, Brady, from when I was born. And then he ended up getting sentenced to 20 years.
How old were you when that happened?
4.
You were 4. Okay.
He got out after about 3 years, moved back to Pensacola. I saw him sporadically between the ages of probably 5 and 15, 4 or 5 times a year, maybe. Right. Always fishing. He loved fishing, blue marlin fishing. So we would go fish marlin tournaments and stay on the boat for 4 or 5 days and go fishing. But he was always hustling. That's one thing that always stuck with me, is the guy always hustled. And even till the end of his life, when he passed away in 2010, he went back up to North Florida, which is the largest aquifer in the Southeast, and went and gathered up lease rights to all these natural springs, hustling, and sold the water rights to Nestle. So if you drink Zephyrhill or Poland Spring waters, that was his water.
Wow.
So one thing he left in me, I knew I didn't want to go the route he did and have to deal with the federal government. The federal government has unlimited resources. You're not going to win. So it wasn't like, don't try to beat the law. Let's go change it. And the real moment when I decided I was going to get in the cannabis sector is when he was diagnosed with cancer. He had prostate cancer, but when it metastasized to the bone, I was about 30 years old. I had just had my wife was pregnant with our son. And I said, okay, I got to go do this. I was a lawyer at a big firm, kind of rising up through the firm, youngest guy to make partner, but it wasn't going to let me do what I wanted to do, which was be an entrepreneur and get into the cannabis sector. Mm-hmm. So I was a government relations attorney. I did a ton of lobbying in Tallahassee and DC. And once Florida started the process, I said, I'm going to do it. And he passed away in 2010. And that was kind of the seminal moment for me where I went, I'm going in. Mm-hmm. My wife was freaked out because I just made partner at a firm, nice, steady, secure life. But I said, I think I can do better than this. And, here we are in Aspen for a month after just selling the Cresco. And I think she's okay. Yeah. I think she knows we're going to make it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even outside of the end result, man, I just want to say that's so commendable. And, to just take that leap of faith, when times are uncertain, but it's just following that passion and inside what is true to yourself and what you'll be happy with doing. And I just commend everybody who's doing that. And I just can relate, because that's kind of what I'm doing with this podcast and entering the industry, is just, breaking away from the corporate hustle and bustle and being confined to an office space and whatnot, and just really chasing after what you want to do.
You only get one life, bro. We only get one run at this. So it's like, there's a point in time when this industry, we're in a nascent market, man. I say it all the time. Life on the frontier is hard. And we could do 5 podcasts on how hard it is to build out a cannabis business with all the pitfalls and everything that this federal law overhang. But life on the frontier is hard, but it's fun, man. Mm-hmm. It's something, I took about 2 or 3 days off when we first got out here, but not really taking any calls, not doing anything. And then I still got the itch. I'm just like
Right.
my dad in that sense. I got the hustle. I'm actively working on the next thing. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but you know, that moment in 2010 when I was rolling joints for him when he was fighting bone cancer at the end, because he couldn't roll them himself and he didn't want to take Oxycontin. He didn't want to take opiates.
Right.
This is a guy that did a lot of drugs. I mean, he was a marijuana smuggler at a high level in the South Florida and in racing in the late 70s and early 80s. Drugs were everywhere. And this is a guy that the opioids made him feel like such shit. He didn't even want to take them, even at stage 4 bone cancer that was terminal. Cannabis was the only thing that provided him relief. And that was kind of I say it's a seminal moment. That was the moment where I went, fuck it, I got to go do this.
Right.
So he died in July of 2010. I started working in the legislature in 2011. In 2012, we missed. In 2014, we got a low THC bill passed, but we missed the constitutional amendment. And then in 16, we actually got it across the line. And in 16, right after that, I spearheaded along with a group, and we put together and did the first license to ever change hands in the state of Florida. We bought Chestnut Hill Tree Farm that became Liberty Health Sciences, that is now AYR.
Right.
I was one of the founders of that. I was there for about 9 months, and then I was out of there.
So just to back up, Brady. So first off, like, just to expand on your point of like the industry being fun to be involved in. It's also obviously, you know, in your experience rewarding, right? Because you see the efficacy, you see how the plant can benefit people with certain ailments, particularly ones with cancer, like your father. I know that my uncle died of the same cancer, prostate cancer, metastasized the bone, same thing. So I sympathize and relate to that, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, and so, you know, but just going back to, you know, you do see it's rewarding at the same time while it is fun, because we know that this plant does provide therapeutic and medicinal benefits. And so that was kind of your moment where you said, you know, based off of my dad's experience, he obviously dismissed the opioids, you jumped right in, and you haven't stopped since. And so when you talk about reform and legislation at the medicinal level in Florida, tell us what that process was like. Like, I mean, were the policymakers as open and forthcoming, or I
No,
mean, how does it
no,
all go down? Yeah.
no. It was. I knew it was going to be a heavy lift. I had the privilege of being trained for about 7 years as a young lawyer by a former Senate president named Jim Scott in Tallahassee, and Jim was my boss, and he's still revered as probably one of the godfathers of Tallahassee politics. So I had an insider's look, and was trained, represented a lot of nascent markets. You know, we represented a lot of disruptive markets at the firm. So transportation, we did a lot of the cabs. Uh, Education law, we did a ton of education law work. So when charter schools came around, we worked on a lot of those, which, you know, disruptive things. So I knew I had experience in being disruptive and how hard that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew with cannabis, it was going to be climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops, to use a hiking reference.
Right.
Because Tallahassee, you know, Florida, everyone thinks Miami, Fort Lauderdale, South Florida, very progressive, big cities. Tallahassee's been on a Republican supermajority since like 1993, 94. I mean, I'm
Wow.
like 28-10 majority in the Republican to Democrat in the Senate,
Right.
even worse in the House. So I knew it was going to be a big uphill battle in the early days. And it's still, I mean, just this year we were fighting THC caps, and I had to take an active role and a vocal role in fighting those. So it was going to be hard. Lawmakers were not receptive at all. Even after 2016, they purposely underfunded the Office of Medical Marijuana Use just so the department, I mean, sometimes we would wait up to 6 to 7 weeks to get a variance request approved.
Jeez.
Something as simple as adding a new product. The wait time to get your medical card as a patient was over a month. They were purposely kind of slow playing the process. And
Right.
you got to be incredibly patient. I know I'm on tweeting all the time about it, but anything policy making, I can't stress it enough, whether it's state level or DC, is a game of incrementalism. And I know that's super hard and to kind of wrap your arms around for a lot of people in today's instant gratification. You see
Right.
something on your phone, you can click buy and it's at your house the next day. You know, instant gratification world that we're in. But policy making, you got to think about it as you're steering the biggest aircraft carrier in the world. They don't turn on a dime. It takes a minute. You have to do a long, like 40-mile turn to turn around. So that's very much what Tallahassee was like. I mean, like I said, we started in 2012. We didn't get to the amendment until 2016. We didn't have active legislation until July of 2017. And from there, it still took until about last year. And I give Chris Ferguson, the new OMU director, a tremendous amount of credit, because he really came in with a big business regulatory mind and really revamped that, where now our variance requests are under a week. Now our patient on onboarding is like 4 days.
Wow.
And it also helps that cannabis has taken such a pivotal role in traditional American politics and even the mainstream and financial media. I mean, it's talked about every single day.
And yeah, and you know, to that point, I want to dive deeper into that, Brady, because you know, first entering this space as a podcast host, I understood that, and from my perspective, I see, and I know a lot of others in the industry see this as well, is that cannabis intersects with so many different topics due to federal prohibition, right? I mean, the talk of economic growth and prosperity, the talk of racial injustice, the talk of ways in which we can produce material goods differently and more sustainably, you know, environmental sustainability. I mean, there's so many different things that with education, I think that we can help more people and even our policymakers understand this.
Well, what's amazing is people are reaching out to the policymakers. So what happened in Florida with the THC caps is a perfect example. We partnered up with Florida for Care. We have over, almost close to 600,000 patients here in Florida, and we mobilized everybody, and phones were ringing on the Hill.
Yeah.
And we were able to beat them. And same thing happens in DC. A lot of people are up there, and I'm stoked to have guys like Boris Jordan and have Kim Rivers and Charlie Batchel, who's a dear friend, and Ben Cobbler. Having all them active in DC now is huge because we can crank the volume up. If you take the top 5 MSOs and add up all the amount of people that they employ nationwide, and those people start ringing and dialing, and then you have e-blasts go out to all those patients that they serve, and everyone starts clicking email forms or calling their representative, the volume goes up, because that didn't exist. When I started lobbying DC heavy on this issue in 2015 with Haley Barber and his group, BGR Group, as my lobbyist, it was us and Scott's Miracle Grow and Normal, and that was it. There was nobody else up there. Right. And it was scary because we were going up against 65 years of big pharma, big alcohol, and big tobacco lobbying. Right. That's 50, 60 years of them fundraising for people in Congress and in the Senate. That's 50 to 60 years of them going to meetings, hosting fundraisers, hosting events,
and having bases of support that they've established and grown, right? I mean, like Correct. All that, right? Yeah.
But again, I love disrupting. To me, some people saw that and said, "Oh, I'm just going to write a check, join an association," and some CEOs saw that and said, "I'll join an association and they'll keep me updated." For me, that's the fight I love. Right. You show me something that can't be done. You show me something that's hard. And, I give my guy at BGR, Pete Landrum, if he ever listens to this, Pete's a fucking warrior. And Pete was Jeff Sessions, one of Jeff Sessions' main guys throughout his entire tenure as a U.S. Senator. And then, that was one of the first meetings we had when I retained them, was to go talk to Sessions after he issued the Sessions memorandum rescinding coal in January 4th, 2017. I remember where I was when it came out. And what wasn't reported much was, like, 3 months after the Sessions memo came out and he declared war on cannabis, we defunded his war by getting the Robacher Amendment passed again, which basically said that if the Justice Department has no funds allocated to it to pursue anything related to medical marijuana.
Wow.
So that was a huge win for me.
That's
like
awesome.
That was one where Pete loves Willamette Valley Pinot Noirs. We had a really good one that next trip I was up in DC after that. But when I tell you that I used to go up there on a 6 a.m. flight out of Fort Lauderdale, land at 11, Uber directly to the Capitol, meet Pete up there, and we would do like 25 to 30 meetings over 2 days. And most times in the beginning, we couldn't get anybody to pay attention. We got the person that made coffee in the office. But what's amazing now, going back, is members are requesting to see us now. Wow. Including very Republican members. I'm talking, even Senator Tuberville's staff is actively looking at cannabis. I could rip off a list of names. So that's why when I'm tweeting a lot and I'm talking about it's a lot closer than people think. For safe banking, we have the votes right now. And we can talk about, how I think that's all going to play out. But what's been absolutely probably one of the most rewarding professional experiences of my life is to see the industry come together. Some people go, "Oh, these, some of these CEOs and companies haven't been around from the beginning." I don't give a shit. If they're here now, awesome. We need the help.
Right.
And to see
more hands on deck.
How much support. Oh man, it's crazy. And to see how much that has galvanized the support, and we've taken this from a tier 4 issue in DC to what I believe is now a tier 1 issue.
Hell yeah.
So much so that if Majority Leader Schumer doesn't get something done by the time the midterms come around, it's going to be something they're going to severely regret come those midterm elections, in my humble opinion. You know, there's a lot of people that may disagree with me there.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean,
they've tethered.
Go ahead. Sorry.
They've tethered themselves to cannabis reform. They've got to do it. They have no choice.
They ran on the premise. You're exactly right. And it doesn't help when you're tweeting every week that you're working on it and reminding people every day when it hasn't happened. So I totally agree. Brady, to back up and talk about the galvanizing effect that we're seeing of more and more CEOs coming together and lobbying on behalf of the industry and meeting with policymakers. It's amazing, right? I mean, because I'm seeing it from the outside as well. I know that you've seen the shift firsthand. What does it mean now to the industry with large corporations like Amazon, not only changing their drug policy for certain employees, but also lobbying on behalf of the industry for cannabis legalization?
It's absolutely monumental. I can't underscore. If I ever get a chance to meet Jeff Bezos, I'll give him the biggest hug, because when the biggest, arguably the biggest consumer company, logistics company in the world takes a public position like that, not just privately, but goes through the process to do it publicly and go on record, that sent shockwaves through the marketplace and DC. And that's huge. And then you see, CEOs weighing in, big cannabis CEOs are taking an active role in this. I mean, Joe Byron at Curaleaf is taking an active role. Obviously, Boris has taken an active role. Charlie, Ben, Kim. I mean, when I sent out, Representative Perlmutter's legislative director, Colin, reached out to me right before they were going to have the House vote on SAFE just about a couple months ago, and said, "Can you get me letters of support from all the big cannabis companies supporting SAFE and giving us some reasons why they support SAFE?" I sent out emails.
Easy.
And
you're like done. Yeah.
It was incredible, because everybody responded almost instantaneously and sent letters back. Even Colin was like, "Holy crap, we don't even see this in traditional industries."
Wow.
Just because it makes sense.
Right.
It's common sense policy. But again, everyone needs to remember there's two buckets. There's the investment bucket, and there's the capital markets portions of cannabis, and then there's federal policy reform. And oftentimes I think they get combined together. The policy reform it's happening. I mean, Maxine Waters had a great line, Representative Maxine Waters, "The genie's out of the bong," whatever you want to say. Right. I like to say the tide's turned. You're not going backwards. We're now at a point where even alcohol and tobacco and pharma are at the you can't beat them, join them moment, which is why you see them dipping their toes in and doing acquisitions and doing investments in the space. It's also why I honestly believe you see sometimes so much pressure on some of the big names, even on days they release good news, because I think you're seeing a coordinated effort amongst a lot of the big brokerages to choke off supply or maintain low volume, to keep prices at a point that until US listings happen, to keep pricing kind of suppressed on some of the bigger names, so that the big banks, pension funds, hedge funds that can't really touch it yet, when it happens, they're going to be able to get in at a good entry point.
That makes a lot of sense.
Some people think I'm crazy. No. Some people think I'm crazy and I got a tinfoil hat on. You don't see companies post the record numbers that these companies post across the top 5 MSOs and even the tier 2 MSOs. You don't see that, and see the stocks they should be ripping the day after.
Right.
And they don't. You see them rip for a little bit, or then 2 days later they're getting crushed again. They're back down. I think that's just to maintain a nice entry point for all the big U.S. capital that's going to flood into the market once you see safe banking pass and the regulatory change after safe. That's my. People always ask especially my father-in-law, who loves trading. It's going, why does it always go down on a good news? I said, because people want a better price point to enter the market when they can.
And it's not like they're forced. Like, I mean,
that
price
no volume,
right? And they're not listed on the American exchanges anyway. So the awareness factor from the average retail investor isn't there, right? So now's the time to do that, right? Yeah, I think that there's some validity to that for sure. Brady, let's talk about, so when you talked about how you believe safe banking will play out, let's talk about it. I mean, we kind of touched on the fact that every day we've got, Schumer's interns tweeting on behalf of his account, saying it's coming. But what are you like? What's going on? What do you think's going to happen?
So, in my humble opinion, based on conversations on the Hill, and we're actively doing update calls every week. Even while I'm out here in Colorado for the month, the phone, I'm still on the phone with Pete. Pete and I are teeing up calls. Schumer has tethered himself to the issue. Majority Leader Schumer has tethered himself to this issue. He is sincere in his desire, having spoken to him one-on-one on a couple of occasions. He is sincere in his desire to reform these cannabis laws, and especially social equity and social justice. And as someone whose father went to prison and whose family was broken up as a result of cannabis laws, I am 100% behind him. What I think the Democratic caucus has woken up to is something that they were kind of a dog chasing a car, to use an analogy.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the car is cannabis reform, and they finally caught it, and they didn't know. Okay, so what does social justice even look like? How do you do this?
Right.
How do you actually undo 60 years of bad policy with the federal policy writing pen? It's not easy. This isn't something you can do. And big bills with a lot of different things. And my buddy Jeff Schultz often has a good analogy. If you put too many ornaments on a Christmas tree, it's going to topple over. And then your kids are going to come downstairs and they're going to be pissed. So at the end of the day, he has to go take a high political position and push a big, broad reform bill because he's talked about it. And he's also going to get primaried, it looks like, by AOC. So he has to talk to that far liberal side of the party and post a bill that is going to talk to that. But then I think you're going to see, I think they understand that they don't have even the 50 Democrat votes to support what's been outlined as what his bill will look like, much less picking up the other Republican votes that are needed. So I think you're going to see it get filed as a draft version for review and consideration. And then I think you're going to see towards the, mid Q3, early Q4, you'll see SAFE get teed up in the Senate to either be included along with a must-pass bill is probably the most likely route. I don't think it's going to be a standalone bill on its own, but there is support, and there is support within both parties for it to move as part of another bill, a broader bill, one of the must-pass bills. And I think that's what you're going to see happen. And people may not think that's not enough, especially on the social equity side. And I would agree with them. The social justice side, I would agree with them. But the picture I often paint when I'm talking to those legislators is, I ran a publicly traded cannabis company, and we couldn't access banking except for one small bank in Florida, one tiny little, and that's where almost every MSO that operates in Florida banks. We had to run armored cars between our dispensaries every 24 hours to sweep the cash and drive it to the bank's one branch in Orlando. And if that's how, and it was very expensive to bank. And when you go look at what the average cost of capital is for these public companies, public MSOs, I mean, it's nothing's less than 10% interest. Those are for publicly traded companies posting huge numbers with audited financials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How does a minority cannabis applicant in the state of New York, for example, that's going to do, I think, a good job in how they set up their minority access and social justice and social equity access for market entrance? How does that minority applicant obtain capital to build out a dispensary in New York in a meaningful way that doesn't completely crush their ability to make money? Or how does that minority applicant access banking? Because if public companies with audited financials, auditors, boards of directors, ridiculous talent in the C-suite across multiple CPG categories, if all those people in those companies can't access it, and I'm living proof we couldn't access it, how is a minority applicant going to do that outside of safe banking getting passed? I can tell you they're not going to.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because like in my home state where I grew up in New Mexico, obviously they just went adult use, and with their bill, they had to do that. They had to make the recreational component standalone. And then they had to separate the social justice, social equity component, because it's too hard. Basically, it's too difficult. Like you said, it's too much to bite off at one time. So we're seeing that more states are kind of taking that approach. But to your point, you have to make sure that these underprivileged, low socioeconomic, people that have been affected by the plant can even have a chance to enter the space as well, right? I mean, it's kind of like putting a band-aid on this without actually thinking through banking and other types of reform to have them have a chance.
Banking's the first step.
Yeah.
Banking's the first step. And I know it's not the sexiest step if you're a social justice activist. I get it. But that's the first step, getting people meaningful access to low cost capital so they can build a dispensary business and start to undo some of the wrongs that our draconian cannabis laws did to them or their families. What you don't want to have happen is what happened in LA when they did the social equity licensing. And all you saw was minorities went on as straw people on the front, and non-minorities owned via warrants and everything else the whole back of the business. And a year or so in, when the minority business owner couldn't contribute capital alongside his well-financed partners, all of a sudden the well-financed partners controlled the business. That is no longer, that can't happen.
Right.
And I think that is it's if you were asking me what my first step was social justice, because I got asked this question by policymakers, do a budget bill in the budget and appropriate capital or appropriate federal funds to go to each state and tie them being able to access education funds or transportation funds to utilizing the funds that would be appropriated to them to offer free expungements of cannabis convictions via the public defenders in each state. Call it Operation Fresh Start.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's one of the things that we came up with. I mean, there's an easy one. Get the scarlet letter off people. If you've got a cannabis conviction, take the scarlet letter away.
Right.
That's step one. That was because it's attainable. You could set up a federal tax on cannabis at 1% to fund that program, and fund that program. Make the states take the money if they want to be able to build bridges, roads, or schools, and put the money with the public defenders in each county. And almost all someone's got to do with a cannabis conviction is walk into that office or fill out a form online, and bang, they can get their records expunged, and now they can go get a real job without having to check that box. Yes, I have a conviction. That was step one for us.
Right.
That's what we've been kind of loosely talking to policymakers about. And I've relayed that to Schumer's team as well as something I think, look, I'd love to live in utopia where it's all fixed overnight. It doesn't exist. What I share with them is this is a wonderful step one. And then you move into the first thing SAFE's going to do, you got to remember, Kevin, is if SAFE passes and Republican lawmakers wake up the next day and people aren't falling out of the sky stoned as bats, they're going to go, maybe that's not so bad. And then we're going to get money in banks, and then they're going to see how much money's in the banks and go, oh my God, what could we tax this industry at? And given the margins everyone's achieving, a 1 to 2 to 3% tax, I don't think anybody's going to cry about. I'll tell you a funny story. I was in a joint meeting, Senate and House meeting one time with the team in DC, and a lot of big names in the room, a lot of policymakers. And I raised my hand about halfway through, and I saw Pete kind of go, oh crap, what's he going to say? And I said, I just want to make sure everyone understands this. But you guys see a lot of people with a lot of lobbyists every day coming in and out of your offices asking for things or giving you policy positions. I'm the only guy that's ever come in any one of your offices that's paying BGR Group what I'm paying them, which is not an insignificant amount of money every month. And I'm flying up here on my own dime to come do this, begging to be taxed and regulated. Everybody else is coming in begging to be not taxed and not regulated. I just want to let that sink in for a moment, because I'm the only salmon swimming upstream trying to get by the bear. And you guys you're making it hard for me to be taxed and regulated. I don't get it. And they all laughed.
Oh man, if I could be a fly on the wall at that moment, I would have been. There had to have been some laughs or like some chuckles like that.
Oh, there was laughs.
Yeah.
They're like, shit, we didn't think about it that way. I'm like, well, I just want to make sure we're all operating under the same framework here. I'm begging to be taxed and regulated. Hit me.
Right. Yeah. Do your job, please.
Yeah. Hit me. You're not going to hurt me. I promise. You're not going to offend me. Let me put my money in a bank. Let me list in the US. Let's make this an American growth story. It's been my whole pitch to them this is a grown in America story. This is not a made in China or a made in some far off country where labor laws suck and people are making $1 a day. This is a grown and made in America, making good wages, cannabis industry hired at record levels during COVID when most everybody else was shedding employees. Like, this is a grown in America story. Give us the firepower to make it this an industry that America can be proud of.
100%.
And you know what?
Yep.
They're waking up. They're seeing it. They're all seeing it. And it's, the only guy I'm really disappointed in, politics aside, has been Joe Biden and his team. And, it is what it is. I think a bill lands on their desk, they'll sign it. But all that stupid shit with people getting fired over cannabis,
Right.
and
I know. Yeah.
it's like, come on, man, you had an opportunity. I was a huge fan of Obama's presidency. I thought he was an amazing leader, and I thought he was a good orator. But the one thing that he kind of leaned in and kind of shot his shot on healthcare and pissed a lot of people off, and then had a hard time getting anything else passed. If I had a chance to shake his hand and meet him, the one thing I would say is, why didn't you tackle cannabis first? You had unified government. You could have ripped it right through.
And he consumed, I think, in high school or in college, right?
Yeah.
So like
He's a cool dude. He's a golfer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's a golfer. He's a surfer. He likes having a good time. He's probably the coolest president we've had since JFK. And it's like do that first. But that's tomato. Monday morning quarterbacking is easy. But
right.
The Biden team needs to take a much different role and viewpoint on cannabis, I think, than they have thus far. But again, I don't blame them, because they've also had a myriad of issues to deal with that are obviously public health concerns, COVID spreads,
right.
Foreign policy concerns. They've got other concerns, but this is something that I think they are underscoring the amount of support. When you see these polls come out, 90% of Americans favor legalization of cannabis. When you see the states that are now legalizing cannabis, they're not far off Western, liberal states anymore. I mean, you've got probably the number 2 market in the world is Florida, and that is the biggest swing state in any election every 4 years.
Right. And like with Biden, it's just like it could be a huge political win also, right? And I guess I understand, to add to your point about the frustration, is change is hard, because I mean, I think we know from Biden's history, and then even Kamala Harris's history, as what was she, lieutenant? It was within San Francisco. She was the lieutenant or head defender. Within San Francisco.
She was a prosecutor. She was a prosecutor.
Yeah. So, I mean, change is hard. I know that we're all kind of starting to learn more, because the education, the amount of knowledge around the efficacy and everything that we've talked about this plant has been suppressed. But I agree, we want to see more. I want to ask you something, Brady, and this is kind of me putting I don't know if it's a tinfoil hat or like an interesting plot twist that could take place, but Justice Clarence Thomas recently came out and spoke about how federal cannabis laws, really, the prohibition really doesn't make sense anymore, with more states coming online, and how they're kind of conflicting with one another. I think it was the gist. I may have butchered what he said, but at a high level, that's
you're right.
What he spoke about, right? So my question to you is, like, I'm not sure if people remember, but like when Obama was president, he's not the one who actually passed gay marriage in the country. It was a Supreme Court decision due to a court case, right? That went to the Supreme Court level. And so the Supreme Court overturned that, or they just made it law, right? So in this case, and explain to me how this works, I'm not quite sure, but would a court case have to reach the level of the Supreme Court for them to then make the decision to overturn a current federal law and supersede the president? Is that possible?
It's incredibly unlikely. I think what you're going to see, though, especially given, I can't underscore as a lawyer how awesome it was to read Justice Thomas's opinion, especially given he's one of, regarded as one of the more conservative justices on the panel.
Right.
On the court, to actually be the one that he didn't have to write that opinion. They denied cert, so they denied review. Usually when you deny review, it's just denied. It's a one-line order. They don't usually give you, well, this is what we think. They did that for a very specific reason. I think it was a very calculated shot across the bow, to say, get it going, guys, like gals, let's go. Mm-hmm. And you can't have this his words, half in, half out regime anymore. You can't have businesses that are lawfully employing people, and then they're not being able to deduct a lot of the normal business expenses anybody else's. That 280E was aimed at the Colombian drug cartels and my father, and them using legitimate businesses to wash cash. That's what 280E was aimed at. It wasn't aimed at state legal businesses employing, law-abiding Americans who go to work every day and collect a paycheck to feed their families in the cannabis industry. So I think Thomas just said what a lot of people in policymaking have been wanting to say. He used the pen of the Supreme Court, which I'll give him a tremendous amount of credit. Could a case get to the Supreme Court in the next, 2 years that could look to have, something happen. Yes, the problem is the biggest single gating issue that we have outside of banking is the Schedule One, and it being listed on Schedule One, which the court can't. I don't believe the court can declare that descheduling has to occur. So I think it was more of a calculated. They could certainly declare certain things to be in violation or conflict. They could set the stage. I don't think they can accomplish the goal, but more than anything, it was a shot across the bow. And I'm working on another op-ed with Tim Seymour now that's going to kind of go into that, and it should come out in the next month or so. Then we do a healthy discussion on it. But Justice Thomas is an absolute American hero for having the courage to step out on that ledge, especially as a conservative jurist, and to issue and author that opinion. It was absolute. As a lawyer, I was like, I haven't jumped up and down like that since Florida State won a national championship. Like, I was fired up. It was pretty cool.
Right. No, I had the same reaction. Yeah, no, it was an awesome moment, and it was great to see the industry kind of just, further reinforce that message and just blast the word out, because we're really seeing momentum, and it's great to see. Brady, I want to shift gears now from the political landscape and talk about the current market dynamics that you're seeing within the cannabis industry, and then more specifically, the current state of the Florida medical cannabis market.
Yep. So I think you're seeing, we obviously closed. I'm sure you saw the tweet. I guess it was June 25th. Myself and my core group kind of transitioned out of one plant after selling to Cresco.
Congratulations,
Which,
by the way.
I'll,
that was huge.
thank you.
Congratulations. Yes.
It was quite the ride, man. From Sol Global and aggregating the assets to spinning Bluma out on my own, building a team, incredibly underfunded. I mean, one day I can tell you the stories, but I mean, we made payroll on big payroll runs sometimes by like under $1,000. But we did it. We did it our way, which is the thing I'm absolutely most proud of. It was a sole focus on premium, the best or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really cool experience. It was just an experience I'll never forget. It was painful. I underestimated how emotional it would be to leave, especially because we were a family. We were a very tight knit group. We had very low OPEX. We had very low headcount as compared to our peers. Our people did 5 and 6 times the work of other companies because they were all bought in. And the good news is I got a chance to really get to know everybody at Cresco, and I can't give a better endorsement for our company. What Charlie and his team are building is in my opinion the best MSO. They're right there with GTI. I think those, if you're asking me my 2 favorites, those are my 2 favorites. And I think you're going to see entrants come into Florida, but I think across the industry, I think you're going to see these MSOs. Being an MSO is hard. Let's be real honest here. It's not like you can be an alcohol distributor and grow your wine in Napa and sell it around the country or around the world, or you can distill your bourbon and whiskey in Kentucky and distribute it worldwide. You got to build out distribution, processing, manufacturing, and retail and logistics in each individual state without the ability to cross state lines,
right,
for efficiency purposes. It's hard, man.
Mm-hmm.
And to build the team necessary to run that, to run individual operations in each individual state from a core C-suite, it's hard. And I think you're going to continue to see these MSOs continue to grow, but I think the numbers to watch are the OPEX numbers, to see how they're managing that growth and how they're going to do it efficiently. But to me, my favorite place to be in this space is always going to be in the premium side of things and building out premium brands. And I just read a great market research report on who is the adult use consumer in 2021 and beyond. And yeah, people are going to probably enter the market and Curaleaf select carts or traditional vape carts to start lower end products. But just as the same as almost any other CPG category, there's always going to be a desire to attain quality and premium at some point.
Mm-hmm.
People may enter at a bottom level, and they're always going to kind of want to matriculate up to the better quality. And I think the company that can figure out how to scale and do premium at scale, which is what we did in Florida, those are the companies, those are the top 3 or 4 companies that are going to ultimately, if we look back 20 years from now, and I think you're seeing a lot of companies struggle with that. It's not easy to grow premium cannabis at scale. You hear a lot of discussion on interstate commerce and people weighing on, well, with interstate commerce, we are so far away from interstate commerce. It's like, it's not even worth talking about at this point.
Right.
Because let's assume, this is something I disagree with Boris on based on the statements that he's made. We're a long ways away, because even if interstate commerce passes, it's still regulated by each individual state cannabis regulatory agency. So let's just use Florida, for example. The OMMU in Florida sets who has a license, who can do what with that license, what products you can sell, where it has to be grown. And the OMMU would have to completely change their regulations with the assistance of the Florida legislature that doesn't really want to mess with cannabis to allow for outside product to be sold into Florida. You're going to have to do that across all 50 states to get interstate commerce opened up.
And what would be the incentive right away for states to open up their borders and let other flower and other products come in from other states?
None.
Right?
Zero.
Right.
Zero. There's none, because they're barely able to regulate their own markets. I mean, this is a nascent market. They're barely able to develop regulation. And Florida's doing great. Look at California. I mean, there's as many unlicensed illegal dispensaries out there
Right.
that are going month to month until they get kicked out as there are legal dispensaries. Now you're going to want to talk about driving product in from Washington and Oregon and be able to sell that in stores. It's not happening. People can talk about it. That's one I kind of chuckle. I get asked about interstate commerce all the time. I'm like, my kids will be out of college before we're talking about interstate commerce being meaningful impact in cannabis. That said, I think you're going to continue to see these MSOs are going to continue to post numbers, and you can't, at some point in time, people aren't, the bigger market dynamics are just not going to be able to ignore it. When you see the amount of EBITDA and the amount of net cash that some of these big companies like GTI and Cresco and Trulieve and Cureleaf and TerraScent are generating, even amidst the draconian banking laws and tax laws.
That's what blows my mind, is how well they're performing, even with all of those outdated draconian laws, like you mentioned. It's incredible.
To me, that's why I say buy the ticket, take the ride. Because if you're buying right now, just turn your brain off and go for the ride. If you study the charts every day, you can drive yourself into hysteria. There's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days, but I'm playing this game for 2025, not for 2021.
Same.
Yeah, so for me, it's like, there's going to be ups and downs. There'll be little market tweaks here and there when this happens or this doesn't happen, or Schumer talks about a bill in March and here we are in mid-July and we haven't seen it yet. Like, yeah, there's going to be a downturn, but at the end of the day, if you believe that this is a true CPG category that's a disruptor, and I will tell you, the minute I knew it was a true disruptor is when big alcohol, big tobacco, and big pharma started forming associations to lobby against us.
When was that?
Okay, that's when 2016, 2017, they formed that stupid SAM thing, sensible approaches to marijuana or whatever it is. Those guys.
I want Kevin Sabet to come on. I want him to come on.
Oh God. Yeah, don't have me on that. I can't bite my tongue. That guy's it's a joke. They showed up in Florida. They were largely spearheading all of the THC caps that legislation you saw pop up across multiple states this past year, because they couldn't get it done in DC, so they tried to go at the state level. So look, to me, this is a long game. I think as an industry, the thing I'd pay attention to is who's able to do premium at scale, because it's not easy, but if you can command a high price point. And my market thesis, and I got asked this question a lot in Florida and by analysts, how do you see yourself stealing share from Trulieve or Cureleaf or Soterra? And I said, I'll get their customers because I got good quality product. And we had 8 stores and we had the second highest volume per store in the state. That shows we could go get their customers. But I wasn't interested in going getting their customers. And they go, what? I go, I was interested. We have 21 million people in Florida. We have 585,000 patients. I want to grow good enough cannabis that everybody else that doesn't have a card that's still buying weed in a Starbucks parking lot, I want to grow good enough weed that it's better than the black market weed, that they go get their card to come buy it from me. Right. And when we started having patients coming in, we had patients coming in because I spent a ton of time in the stores. I kind of saw myself as kind of like a Robin Hood. I loved going to meet the patients. I spent a ton of time in the garden, and just to get the feel, get the pulse of the street. And
yeah, you're always posting cool videos about like your grow house operation. I see the beautiful flowers. So you're on the front lines. I see it, man. Yeah.
I love working in the garden. I mean, I planted our first plants in that garden while we were all crying our eyes out because we never thought it was going to happen. I mean, just a week before we tried to move into the garden, Ritter Hortomax, our environmental control and watering system, they wouldn't come commission it because it was in the middle of COVID and they were based in California. They couldn't come to Florida to commission it. We had to go to Ace Hardware. We had a $2.5 million system that we couldn't even turn on. We had to go spend $2,000 at Ace Hardware and build a watering pump. And we had to run a garden hose across the field from the one little house on the farm property. And like if a truck parked on the hose, we had to go scream at them to move because it would choke the water. I mean, my wife literally helped me move the plants in because we didn't have enough money to hire people to come do it at that point in time from an OPEX standpoint. So yeah, I lived and breathed it. And one of the moment I knew we were getting traction in Florida, it was about September. It was right when our first harvest had come out of the new greenhouse, the new hybrid Nexus facility. And I was in the store and I struck up a conversation with a patient while they were waiting to get their product delivered to them. And I said, what brought you here? And they went, well, my drug dealer, who I've been buying weed from for 15 years, told me this is where I should go buy it if I have a medical card. That's when I knew we had something.
Nice.
Because he said, I go, really? They go, yeah. He said he's a patient now, and it's the best stuff that it's better than anything he could get. So he's a patient, and this is where I should be going. And he's kind of not doing it anymore. I was like, well, then I'm achieving my goal. It may only be one patient and one anecdotal story, but my market thesis, black market or legal market, has always been if you control the top 10% of any market that you're in. So 5 out of every 10 people walking down the street in Florida are asked who has the best weed in Florida in the medical market. And 5 out of those 10 say my company, I win, because you can always throw ladders down to people. So even if you have premium product, you can always have a vape cart. You can always have really like our pre-rolls. We only ever did whole flower pre-rolls. We weren't sweeping the floors like a lot of companies and throwing the shake in there. Right. It was all whole flower. We didn't sell smalls. We took those smalls and made pre-rolls. And people buy our pre-rolls and they go, I don't cough. I go, yeah, because it's whole flower. It's not a bunch of ground up crap. Right. So there's so many companies have focused on that lower end. The word I hate the most, biomass. It's not biomass. We're growing flower here, but there's so many companies that focused on lower end biomass. And for distillation or for like $25 ACE, my blue sky is and will always be, no matter what I do next, that tier 1 premium flower, hand trimmed, premium genetics. And that's having that focus and willing to bet my life on it, bet my family's financial future on that working. That's what got growers like the guys that I had come work for me and move their families across the country from Humboldt and from Cali and from Colorado, because they went, okay, you're the first person that just didn't tell us to grow it and grow whatever we could. We culled mold. I culled huge lots of product because it didn't meet our quality control. Most people would have thrown it in a jar and sold it. Mm-hmm. I mean, and we needed the fucking money. Let me be clear. I really could have used the money, but once you put out bad product in your jar with your label on it, that's what you're setting yourself up. It's hard to come back from that and still be a premium player.
It's true.
So we had several lots where we made the hard decision. The grow team would call me and be like, look, we had an issue at the end. It's not how we want it. We think, it's up to you. And I had to make the hard call of, all right, payroll is going to be tight, but yeah, let's not sell the product. Let's send it to distillation and get rid of the imperfections. It was one of the main reasons we also went heavy into solventless. And I'll always go heavy into solventless. If you grow good enough flower, then you can have solventless. So for me, that was just that's the biggest sector of the industry I think that needs to mature.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, when you talk about it's so true how even if you're a new entrant as a consumer, your palate is always going to improve. You're always going to kind of be chasing the higher quality, the next premium product, because you start to build palate basically for that product. And to start out from the beginning and not settle and not take shortcuts is really a testament to where you are today and why Cresco acquired your company, right? I mean,
it was one of the things. It was a huge compliment for us when Cresco's got a ridiculous team. I mean, you look at their team top to bottom. They've got a great cultivation team that's based out in Cali. The head of cultivation, Drew Duvall, is a killer. And grown premium flower at FloraCal for a long time. You've got their C-suite based in Chicago. I mean, you've got their COO was a former CEO of US Foods and Pepsi. You've got the Chief Commercial Officer from Miller Coors and Pfizer. I mean, it's no joke. And when they came and toured our facilities, and the compliment that we got is it's the, probably the best cultivation and total operation they've seen, and that we did it on a shoestring. It was a huge compliment to us, and it was something that, we all took a lot of pride in. And it is what got us to where we are, because there's no shortcuts in cannabis. You build a shitty facility, you're going to get shitty flower. You may have a few runs where you can pull it off and do better, but garbage in, garbage out, or good in, good out. There are no shortcuts. Growing premium flower, which sets your ability up to grow, to do solventless or anything else with it, it's hard.
Right.
It's labor intensive, because those plants they're not easy to grow. And there's a reason the black market in Florida, or just like anywhere else in the country, it's, look at any study or any data set that you can find, it's always somewhere between 7 and 9 times as big as the legal market as the black market. That's because there's a lot of really good small batch black market growers who I will always tip my hat and have the biggest respect for, because they're risking their lives, they're risking their families' lives every single day to do it. But they are small batch growers that do it at a super high level, that produce really high quality product without a bunch of regulatory bullshit. So they still have a 7 to 8 times larger market than the medical markets, or even the adult use markets. That's all going to change.
Right.
And what was really cool for me is early on, and once we moved into our garden in Indiantown, one of the, a black market guy who I knew wanted to come see the garden, and he walked in and was crying his eyes out. I mean, legitimately crying, because he's like, I never thought I'd be able to walk in somewhere in the sunshine and see this without like cops and helicopters flying around to see this. So they're all seeing it. And then what's going to be really cool is to see those people with social justice initiatives, because most of them have convictions. Most of my friends that have been black market guys have gotten popped once or twice. I can't hire them to work in the legal cannabis industry if they've got a conviction, which is absolutely fucking mind-boggling.
It's crazy,
because they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing better than the scientists that are coming out of these big agricultural colleges. Yeah, they know how to grow corn or wheat. Growing high quality weed is a lot different than growing wheat or corn.
Right. Yeah. Completely.
Totally different game. And the people that know how to do it best, I can't hire, because they've got a conviction that they should have never had to begin with.
Right.
So yeah, it's maddening, but I think that premium sector, I use wine a lot. My chief commercial officer, Ryan Martin, is a guy I recruited for a long time. Ryan came from 25 years at Gallo Wines, biggest wine company in the world,
Sure.
as a senior executive there, and then just recently ran Bill Foley, who owns Fidelity Financial and all those SPACs. Bill Foley's private wine business. Ryan's a premium genius as far as developing a premium brand, and his whole focus is this. Yeah, you can sell people when they walk into Total Wine $15 Sauvignon Blanc to start, but you can bet that in 6 months they're going to be coming back looking at that $40 bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, because they're going to grow up in quality. Same thing's going to happen in cannabis. Same exact thing's going to happen in cannabis. And unless these big companies like Curaleaf and Trulieve, I left GTI and Cresco off that list, because they're already in the process of developing, and they're already operating premium facilities. But unless some of these other bigger companies start figuring out that biomass isn't going to win the game, that's why I say the biggest single thing that I watch is who's going to do it premium at scale. That to me is going to be, because ultimately the consumer is going to matriculate to premium.
Right. Well, those are good, future predictions and outlook. And I want to also give, a shout out to the audience within Twitter, because I know that the cannabis industry is very active in the Twitter space, and there were some questions that came in. So Brady, if you're good with it, I'll share my screen here, and let's just fire them off, man. We'll go one by one so that we give everybody a chance to get their questions answered. And then we'll go from there, man. But okay, so the first one coming in is Cody has dad jokes. How is the process of how is the process of working with the Cresco team?
Awesome, very collaborative. I give a tremendous amount of credit to Charlie Batchel, who I consider a close friend, for the team that he's built. They came down with open ears, open eyes, and a collaborative intent, and it made the transition very easy. And they do things at a very high level. They have great processes. They have, they're taking their job at scaling across 10 states, and their focus was going deep and wide in the 10 biggest states, from a population standpoint, which I think is what you have to do. And to see that, but then to also, they had a tremendous amount of respect for what we had built and our quality and our focus on quality and our culture. And if Charlie and I spent, he hasn't got a lot of other things going on. I mean, we're one of the assets that he's bought and is operating. We're one of, 9 states that they operate in. So it's not, there's other states to worry about, but he took a personal, very personal approach in working with me collaboratively to make sure that culture was going to be preserved and that the way that we did things to get such high quality product was going to be preserved. So all in all, from a transition standpoint, it couldn't have been a better group to work with. They're absolutely first class.
Love it. Thank you for that. Legalized Medicine at Legalized It, bruh, asks insights on recreational cannabis in Florida.
I think you'll see it in 2024 on the ballot, which would mean it would become effective in July of 2025.
Beautiful. Let's see. Shompzilla, what does more competition in Florida do the market share of the big MSOs? Record amount of new patients last month, ...
I think you're going to see Trulieve continue to have to try to fight to just retain the share that they once had. I think it is more and more. You're going to see Cresco with the plan that I developed with Cresco. My team developed with Cresco. You're going to see Cresco start shooting up that leaderboard in Q3 and Q4 as they start bringing. They're going to have a significant amount of stores come online in Q3 and Q4. They're going to shoot up the leaderboard. I don't know this. I'm just speculating, but I'm relatively certain at some point GTI is going to place their big bet in Florida and scale up as they have in other states. So Trulieve's going to have a tough time maintaining share. And I'm a big fan of what Kim has built. She proved the worth and the validity of the Florida market, and she's built a monster of a business. The one area where I differ with her is I don't think you need to keep opening retail stores personally. I don't think there's any other sector where if you showed that you were going to increase CapEx and OpEx by opening stores, but ultimately lose market share, that would be a winning notion. So I think as more and more companies come online, and I think you're going to see a good, healthy debate and fight in the premium markets when you see companies like Jungle Boys, who I've got a tremendous amount of respect for those guys, see them come online in Florida in the next, year and a half or so. Same with Cookies. Berner definitely knows how to get quality and to get people's attention as you see him come online in Florida with his team. So yeah, it's Florida's going to get very competitive, and I'm not gonna spoil anything, but yeah, we're not done in Florida yet either as a team. So don't count us out yet either too. We're going to make it interesting again here soon.
Gosh, nice. All right, here moving down the list here, David Butler. After we 5 times or 10 times from here, where should the MSO gang do its first celebratory meetup?
I think we should. I mean, I'm a big fan of Colorado, so I think we should maybe get out to Colorado and have a little bit of fun.
Absolutely, yeah. From the pictures, man, I got to get out there to the Oot Trail for sure.
It's awesome, dude. Nothing wrong with Aspen in the summer.
All right, I won't go through all of them, but I'll just have 2 more here. Let's see. Thoughts on the future of indoor cultivation with vertical farming cannabis. This is from Kenny B.
So indoor is obviously the preferred route for a lot of companies because you can maintain complete and total environmental controls. In places like Florida, it makes it really hard because the cost to operate the facility is so much more expensive because of how hot it is and the exterior environmental conditions. I'm a huge fan of indoor. Anything I build again will have an indoor component. But I also am a big fan, having just built it out and tested it, of the hybrid greenhouse system that we just built in Indiantown that we sold to Cresco. In that facility, we were getting, very comparable yields to indoor, but we were getting, as the reviews showed, very high flower quality and high enough flower quality where we were able to actually have what I would consider, flower that was good enough to go and put into solventless and to kind of control the solventless market in Florida, the rosin markets in Florida. So it's been, indoors always going to be there, but I think you're going to see companies start looking at those hybrid facilities too. I'm a huge fan of them because it gets you that sun-grown quality, but you also, you get indoor quality flower, sun-grown, which is pretty cool.
Right. More controlled environment too, right? I mean, you still have that controlled environment. Yeah. Well, Brady, I really appreciate your time, man. We've spent over an hour talking and just Really appreciate all your insights, as you have so much experience being on the front lines, lobbying with governmental relations, and even operating and launching and selling your own MSO. So, congratulations again on the recent acquisition. And I want to leave the floor to you before we wrap up here. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with?
No, just keep being patient. Understand that the federal side of things is a game. It's a game of stepping stones. We're going to get there, and these big names are going to they're doing amazing numbers right now without having any relief from this federal overhang. So just imagine what the world looks like when they don't have that federal law overhang, whether that's in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, a year. The fundamentals are the fundamentals. And then as it pertains to me, I really appreciate you having me on, and you'll be seeing on Twitter as we begin to lay out the plans for what it is that we're going to go do next. But this was not I'm not retired. I'm all in, and my team's all in, and we're excited for the next chapter, and we're excited to share that next chapter with you and the Twitter sphere when we're ready here over the next period of time. So stay tuned.
Love it. Well, I'll definitely be looking out and retweeting and sharing any news that comes out of your camp. And when that time comes, Brady, let's have you back on and talk about what projects you're working on next.
All right, awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks again. And thank you all for listening. Bye.
See you.